They said no man would ever choose her. Then the Korean Mafia boss arrived. The whispers started the moment Zara turned the corner onto Peachtree Street. She heard them before she saw the faces behind them. Still walking around like that? Bless her heart. A cluster of women stood outside the nail salon, arms folded, eyes sharp as scissors. One of them, Zara recognized from her stepmother's social circle, pointed with a freshly polished finger. Honey, no man is ever going to look twice at you. Not like that. Zara didn't stop walking. She shifted the pharmacy bag to her other arm, pulled the wide-brimmed hat lower over the left side of her face, and kept moving. She'd learned a long time ago that giving them a reaction was just feeding something that would never be full. That's when the vehicles appeared. For black SUVs, engines barely audible, rolled to a slow stop at the red light just ahead of her. The kind of cars that didn't belong to anyone ordinary. Atlanta's streets recognized them the way animals recognize a predator, instinctively, immediately. Everyone near the intersection shifted. Conversations dropped. Eyes moved elsewhere out of practiced self-preservation. Everyone's eyes except one pair. The rear window of the second vehicle lowered about 3 inches. From inside the cool shadow of that car, a man watched the woman in the hat walk through the cruelty being hurled at her like she was walking through rain. Her posture never broke. Her chin never dropped. She just kept moving, quiet and dignified, like someone who had made peace with carrying more than her share. His name was Jin-ho Kwon. And he did not look away. But before we go any further, if you're new to this channel, welcome. This is where we tell the stories of women who were counted out and came back as something the world wasn't ready for. Love, drama, and the kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. If that moves you, subscribe right now and hit that bell so you never miss a story. Now let's get back to Zara. Zara Osei had not always moved through the world like she was trying to disappear. There was a time not so long ago when she took up exactly as much space as she pleased. At 22, she had been luminous in the way that made strangers smile for no reason. She had her Ghanaian father's angular jaw and deep-set eyes and her African-American mother's warmth, her laughter, her gift for making anyone feel seen the moment she walked into a room. She was the kind of woman people remembered. Then the fire took that from her. And her stepmother took the rest. Zara's mother, Gloria, had passed away from a stroke when Zara was 19. It was the kind of loss that doesn't fully arrive all at once. It came in waves, quietly devastating. Her father, Kofi, a stoic and hardworking man who owned a small but respected catering business in Atlanta's Old Fourth Ward, did his best. But grief is a language some people never learn to speak out loud, and Kofi was one of them. He retreated into the business, into routine, into work, and Zara learned to grieve alone. 2 years after Gloria died, Kofi married Sylvia Marsh. Sylvia came in softly. She brought home-cooked meals and kind words and patience that seemed, at the time, genuine. She had a daughter, Camille, 20 years old and perfectly aware of how to use her mother's new position to her advantage. For a while the arrangement was civil, almost functional. Then Kofi had a heart attack in his sleep, and just like that, Zara was 24 and alone again. And Sylvia's softness evaporated before the funeral flowers had wilted. "Your father's assets transferred to me as his spouse," Sylvia had said 2 days after the burial, leaning against the kitchen doorframe like she owned the walls. "Which means the business, this house, and everything in it. You can stay, but you'll earn your place here." Zara had been too hollowed out to argue. That silence became the most expensive mistake of her life. Sylvia put Zara on closing shifts alone at the catering kitchen. 6 months after Kofi passed, a gas line near the prep station ignited during one of those solo shifts. The fire moved fast. By the time Zara got out, the left side of her face and her neck had been burned badly. 3rd degree. The kind that leaves a permanent record on skin. She had screamed until there was nothing left in her. At the hospital, Sylvia appeared once in the first week, briefly, with a man from the insurance company. She sat at Zara's bedside for 11 minutes. Zara counted. Camille never came at all. No one from church came. No friends, because by then Sylvia had quietly poisoned those wells, painting Zara as unstable, bitter, hard to be around. When Zara was discharged, still healing, Sylvia handed her a wide-brimmed hat and a scarf. "You'll wear these in public," she said matter-of-factly. "I won't have people feeling sorry for this household because of your face." It's embarrassing enough as it is." Those words didn't leave. They set up residence somewhere behind Zara's sternum and never paid rent. 3 years passed. Zara became a function, not a person. She managed the household, cooked, cleaned, organized, and received nothing for it while Sylvia and Camille moved through life on the insurance payout from the catering business fire. They wore the money like a second skin. Designer bags, quarterly vacations, a social calendar full of events Zara was never invited to. "You should be grateful," Sylvia reminded her regularly. "No man is going to want to build a life with someone who looks like you do. You've got a roof and food. That's more than most." Camille was more creative with her cruelty. "There was a man at the charity brunch who asked about you," she mentioned once, inspecting her nails. "I told him what you look like without the hat. He said, and I quote, 'I'm good.' You can't even be mad at him, honestly. Why would anyone sign up for that?" Zara said nothing. She had trained herself to receive cruelty the way a river receives a stone. Let it enter, let it sink, don't let it change the current. But at night, alone in the narrow back bedroom Sylvia had assigned her, she would sit with the small mirror she kept face down on the dresser and turn it over. She would look at herself for a long time. The scarring ran from her left cheekbone down the side of her neck, textured and permanent. Some nights she could look at it with something close to neutrality. Most nights she couldn't. She wanted to believe that there was a version of her life that looked different from this. She just didn't know how to get there anymore. Jin-ho Kwon had inherited leadership of the Kwon network at 27, when his father suffered a stroke that left him unable to speak. It was not an inheritance anyone would envy. The organization was one of the most powerful Korean syndicates operating on the eastern seaboard, with interests in commercial real estate, private security firms, import logistics, and several ventures that existed in the spaces between legal and not. Jin-ho had spent the 5 years since then building it into something more disciplined, more precise, more dangerous. He was known for 3 things: his intelligence, his stillness, and the fact that he never, under any circumstances, let sentiment interfere with business. And yet here he was, unable to stop thinking about a woman he had watched walk down a street for less than 90 seconds. His mother had called that morning, as she did every week. "Jin-ho, you surround yourself with people who want things from you. That is not a life. Your father picked me up off a factory floor because he saw who I was, not what I had. When are you going to learn to look at people that way?" He told her he was busy, but her voice followed him into the afternoon. He'd been passing through Atlanta's Inman Park neighborhood when he saw the scene outside the nail salon. A group of dressed-up women targeting a single figure who was simply trying to walk past them. The cruelty was loud, practiced, designed to wound. And the woman in the hat absorbed it without breaking, without begging, without tears. She just kept walking like she had been doing it so long it had become its own kind of strength. Jin-ho told his driver to slow down. His right hand, a quiet man named Dae, watched him watching her. "Find out who she is," Jin-ho said. Dae didn't ask why. He never did. Within 72 hours, Jin-ho had a file. Zara, say 27. Father deceased, mother deceased, no living close family. Burned in a commercial kitchen fire 3 years ago. Currently living in her late father's home under the guardianship of his widow. No income, no independence. And then Dae had added a note at the bottom, delivered carefully. "The gas line that ignited. Our contact in the fire marshal's office pulled the archived inspection. A pressure valve had been manually bypassed. Someone who had access to that kitchen in the week before the fire." Jin-ho had looked up. The stepmother. She received the full insurance settlement. Just under $180,000. No investigation was ever opened. Jin-ho sat very still for a long moment. He had lived his entire adult life inside a world built on calculated ruthlessness. He was not easily disturbed. But something about this particular story, a woman deliberately burned, then buried alive inside the ruin of it, moved through him like a current he hadn't expected. He wanted to meet her. Not as Jin-ho Kwon, not as the man people straightened their backs around, just as a man. He arranged it carefully. Zara was crossing through Reynoldstown on a Tuesday afternoon when she heard the sound coming from the gap between a shuttered print shop and a laundromat. A low, controlled groan. The kind someone makes when they are trying not to make a sound. She stopped. Most people in Atlanta knew better than to follow sounds into alleys. Zara knew that too. But she also knew what it felt like to need help in a moment when everyone around you had decided to keep walking. She stepped into the shadow. A man was sitting against the brick wall, one knee raised, one hand pressed firmly below his ribs. He wore dark, unremarkable clothing. No watch, no jewelry. His face was turned at an angle, but she could see the tension in it, the controlled effort of someone managing significant pain. And she could see the blood seeping between his fingers. "Hey," she said. "Are you okay?" He looked up. His eyes were dark and extremely alert for someone in his condition. Korean, she thought. Somewhere in his early 30s. There was a quality to his stillness that felt deliberate rather than weak. "You should keep moving," he said. Accented English, low and even. "This isn't anything to do with you. You're bleeding through your hand." "I'm aware." Zara was already crouching. She pulled the linen overshirt she was wearing over her long-sleeve base layer and folded it quickly. "Let me see." He reached out and caught her wrist before she could touch him. His grip was firm, controlled. "I said leave it." "And I said let me see." She met his eyes without moving. "I'm not going to stand here and watch you bleed out because you're too stubborn to accept help from a stranger. So either move your hand or explain to whoever's coming for you why you're still sitting here in 2 hours. Something passed through his expression. Not quite surprise. Something more like recognition. He released her wrist. The wound was a deep gash along the lower left side of his ribcage. Ugly but survivable if treated quickly. She pressed her folded shirt against it with both hands, applying steady pressure. Her movements practical and calm. "You need stitches," she said. "Not a hospital." "Then you need someone who can close this. Do you have people you can call?" "Yes." "Then call them." He didn't move for a moment. His eyes were on her face. On the hat, on the shadow it cast over her left side. She felt the attention and instinctively tilted her head so the brim dropped a little lower. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. She kept her eyes on her hands. "Because you needed it." "That's a good enough reason." A long silence passed. Then quietly he said, "What's your name?" No one had asked her that in a very long time. Caught her off guard. "Zara." He repeated it slowly like he was placing it somewhere careful. "Zara." A brief pause. "You can call me Jay." She almost asked what that was short for. She didn't. Jay appeared again 6 days later, outside the pharmacy she used on Edgewood Avenue. He was leaning against a car that cost more than most people's annual salaries, looking entirely unbothered about being there. "You followed me," she said. "I prefer tracked down. I wanted to thank you properly. I kept pressure on a wound. It wasn't heroic. Most people don't stop." She crossed her arms. "How did you even find me?" He smiled just slightly. "I'm resourceful." He gestured toward the small Ethiopian cafe on the corner. "Let me buy you coffee." She should have said no. She thought about saying no. Something about the steadiness of him, the absence of performance in the way he spoke to her, made her hesitate. "I don't do coffee. Tea." She almost smiled. "1 cup." 1 cup became a conversation that ran 3 hours. Then he found her again 4 days later, and they talked for 2 more. And then again. And again. Jay asked her things no one had asked in years. What she read. She told him poetry, Lucille Clifton, mostly some Worcestershire. What she wanted if she could want anything. She told him she'd always dreamed of opening a resource center for teenagers who were aging out of the foster care system. Kids who fell through every crack. He listened like her words were worth something. Like she was worth something. He never asked about the hat. He never once let his eyes linger on the shadow at the brim the way people's eyes usually did. He just talked to her like a person. She noticed things though. The way restaurant staff shifted when they arrived, offering the best table without being asked. The way people on the street moved differently around him, subtly, instinctively. A tattoo at his wrist, just visible below his sleeve, geometric and deliberate. She wasn't foolish. She understood that Jay was not an ordinary man. But he had never been anything other than careful with her. One evening they walked along the East Side Trail as the sky went amber, and she finally asked him directly, "Why do you keep coming back? You don't actually know me." He stopped walking. The light was doing something extraordinary to the skyline. All copper and fading rose. I know more than you think, he said. I know you helped a stranger in an alley without once asking what you might get from it. I know you've been through things that would have made other people bitter, and they didn't. I know you listen to people like their words have weight. He turned to look at her. That's not common. It matters to me. Zara's throat tightened. You haven't seen me. Not really. I've seen who you are, he said quietly. That's the part that stays. Then her phone buzzed. Sylvia's name on the screen. She answered immediately because she always did. Where are you? The voice on the other end was tight and cold. You were supposed to have dinner started an hour ago. I have people coming and you're out there doing God knows what. Get home now. The line went dead. Zara lowered the phone. Her face had closed like a door. I have to go. Jay caught her arm gently. Who was that? My stepmother. His jaw shifted. The way she spoke to you. He paused. You don't deserve that. You don't know what I deserve. She stepped back. And she disappeared into the evening before he could say another word. We're in the middle of Zara's story now, and everything is about to break open. If this is hitting you, hit the like button and drop a comment telling me what's moving you most. Your support keeps these stories coming. Now let's see what happens next. The envelope arrived on a Friday morning. Thick cream paper with a gold-foiled border. Sylvia intercepted it at the door before anyone else was awake, turned it over twice in her hands, then called Camille down from her room. It was an invitation to a private fundraising dinner hosted by the Kwon Foundation. Black tie. Saturday evening. And at the bottom a short handwritten line. I would be honored to see you there. Signed with a single initial J. Sylvia did not know who J was, but she understood the weight of that paper. This was money. This was access. She went immediately into planning mode. The next 24 hours were a production. Sylvia booked appointments, ordered a gown for Camille online with express delivery, and rehearsed conversational openers for impressing philanthropists. Zara watched from the kitchen doorway as the house spun around an event she had not been told about and would not be attending. You'll stay in tonight, Sylvia said, walking past her without looking up. Make sure the house is clean before we leave, and don't even think about going anywhere. I won't have you appearing somewhere and embarrassing this family. Zara nodded. She always nodded. But as she watched Sylvia and Camille sweep out into a hired car, trailing perfume and rehearsed smiles, something in her chest tightened in a new way. Not grief. Not shame. Something closer to refusal. She went to her room. At the back of her closet, in a garment bag she hadn't opened in years, she found her mother's dress. Emerald green, floor-length, simple and stunning in the way only well-made things are. She held it for a moment. She didn't have an invitation. She didn't have a plan. She was going anyway. The Kwon Foundation event was held at a converted warehouse space in Midtown that had been transformed into something quietly spectacular. Warm lighting, live jazz, the hum of serious wealth and conversation. Zara slipped in through a side entrance she'd found while the valets were occupied, and stood for a moment near the edge of the room just breathing it in. Then she saw him. And she understood. Jay stood at the center of the room in a perfectly fitted black suit, his posture carrying the kind of ease that only comes with absolute authority. Around him guests angled toward him like plants toward light. Women in gowns that cost more than a mortgage hung on his words. Staff moved with invisible choreography around him. This was not a wounded man in an alley. This was Jin-ho Kwon. This was the name on the invitation. This was the man who owned the room. Zara turned to leave. She walked directly into Sylvia. What? Sylvia said, her voice dropping into something dangerous. Are you doing here? Camille materialized from the left, champagne flute in hand, her face lighting up with the particular joy she reserved for Zara's public humiliations. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. She actually came. She turned to the people nearby, performing shock. She snuck in off the street. Sylvia's voice rose to fill the surrounding space. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You show up here like this, looking like that, in that dress like it's 20 years ago. Her eyes swept Zara from head to toe with visible contempt. You are an embarrassment. You have always been an embarrassment. The people nearby had gone quiet. Zara felt the familiar heat rising up her spine, that old suffocating shame, the reflex to make herself small. Is there a problem here? The voice didn't raise itself. Didn't need to. Jin-ho was standing less than 4 feet away, hands relaxed at his sides, expression entirely unreadable. 2 men in dark suits flanked him at a respectful distance. Sylvia pivoted with impressive speed. Mr. Kwon, no, absolutely not. This is just a misunderstanding. She's not a guest. She's a household employee. I genuinely don't know how she got past security. She came with me. The room didn't so much go silent as become very still. Sylvia's mouth opened and then didn't close properly. Camille's champagne glass lowered by several inches. Jin-ho walked forward, past both of them, and stopped directly in front of Zara. He looked at her the way he always had, like she was the only clear thing in a complicated room. "Jay," she said, barely above a whisper. "You knew. This whole time." "Yes." His voice was low, meant only for her. "I wanted you to know me before you knew what I was." The faintest curve touched his mouth. "I told you I was resourceful." He extended his hand. "Dance with me." The room watched. Zara looked down at his open hand and thought about 3 years of hats and scarves in back bedrooms. She thought about being told she was nothing that anyone would ever choose. She thought about the girl who helped a stranger in an alley, because she still believed it mattered to show up for people. She placed her hand in his. The jazz shifted to something slow and unhurried. He led her to the floor and she followed, aware of every eye in the room tracking their movement. She was shaking slightly and she knew he could feel it. "You're angry," he murmured. "You let me think you were just a person." "I am just a person. I'm also this. Both things are true." He drew her slightly closer. "I needed to know that you could see me, Zara. Not the name. Not the building. Just me. And you did." She closed her eyes for a moment. "Why me? You could have anyone in this room." He was quiet long enough that she opened her eyes again to look at him. "I don't want the room," he said. "I want the woman who knelt in an alley to help a stranger who told her to leave. I want the woman who talks about teenagers aging out of foster care like their lives are the most important thing she can imagine. I want the woman who has been through fire, literal fire, and still chooses softness." He stopped moving. "I want you, Zara. All of you. Including what you're still hiding." She hadn't been thinking about it consciously, but her hand went to the brim of her hat. "You haven't seen," she said. "I know." He held her gaze. "But I'm not going anywhere." The room breathed around them. Somewhere behind her she could hear Sylvia's voice, thin with indignation. She heard Camille say something that got no response from anyone. Zara reached up and lifted the hat from her head. She heard several people near them inhale. The scarring was visible now, the left side of her face, her neck, the edge of her collarbone. All of it uncovered for the first time in 3 years in a room full of strangers. She heard Sylvia from somewhere to her right. "Lord have mercy" in public. But it sounded very far away. Jin-ho did not flinch. He did not look away or recalibrate his expression. He lifted his hand slowly and let his fingers rest against the scarred side of her face with a gentleness that made her breath catch. "You should never have had to hide this," he said. "Not one day of it." And Zara broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. She just broke the way things break after years of pressure, quietly, completely, with her whole body. The tears came in waves and she let them. For the first time in 3 years she just let them. Jin-ho pulled her in and held her. Not for the room. For her. What followed was swift and methodical. Jin-ho had access to things most people couldn't find and connections most people couldn't imagine. The tampered gas valve. The insurance paperwork. The statements from 2 former employees of her father's catering business who had seen Sylvia in the kitchen the week before the fire and kept quiet out of fear. Jin-ho assembled it all and handed it to attorneys with instructions to proceed publicly, through every proper legal channel available. Sylvia received a civil lawsuit on a Wednesday morning. The criminal investigation from the insurance company opened 4 days later. The financial irregularities in how she had assumed the deed to Kofi's home unraveled under scrutiny. Her accounts were frozen. Invitations stopped arriving. The social world she had built on Zara's father's name and Zara's silence withdrew itself without ceremony. Camille's cards declined. The rented lifestyle dissolved overnight. When Zara asked Jin-ho why he had done it that way, openly legally through the courts, he said simply, Because you deserve to be restored where people can see it. Not in the shadows. In the light. The healing was not a straight line, and Jin-ho never pretended it would be. He arranged specialists for Zara's burns, the best available anywhere, and she began a long, careful process of treatment that slowly changed the texture and tone of her scars. But it was the therapist she saw every week who did the deeper work. Zara sat in that quiet office and laid down things she had carried alone for years. Her mother's death. Her father's silence before his own. The fire. The 3 years of being made to feel like a burden wearing a face. The way she had slowly come to believe all of it. Jin-ho did not rush any of it. He was present without being consuming. He showed up consistently without making a performance of showing up. Some nights she woke from nightmares to find him nearby, working quietly, because he had learned the pattern of her bad nights and arranged to be there for them. She would tell him he didn't have to. He would tell her he knew. On a slow evening on the terrace of his apartment, he told her about himself, the weight of inheriting something built on violence and fear. The things he had done that lived in him permanently. The isolation of being surrounded by people who were always calculating. You look at me like I'm worth something ordinary, he said. Not power. Not leverage. Just worth something. I didn't know I needed that until I had it. Zara leaned her head against his shoulder. That's how you made me feel too, she said. Like I was worth something ordinary. He turned his head toward her. I love you. I don't know all the right ways to do that. But I love you. She closed her hand over his. I love you too. We can figure the rest out. 14 months later, Zara stood at a podium outside a building in Pittsburgh Avenue with her father's name on it. The Kofi Osei Community Resource Center. 3 floors. Staff. A crisis line. A program specifically for youth aging out of foster care. Everything she had imagined on the worst nights in that back bedroom, when hope felt like a language she was forgetting. I know what it is to be invisible, she said into the microphone, her voice clear and unshaking. I know what it is to move through the world like you are a problem other people are tolerating. I know what it is to believe the things people say about you when they say them long enough and loud enough. She paused, looking out at the crowd. But I want you to hear this directly from me. Those voices were wrong. About me. And they are wrong about you. Your worth is not a negotiation. It is not conditional. It does not depend on what your face looks like, or what your past looks like, or what anyone decided about you when you were too tired to argue. The applause was long and full. From the back of the room, Jin-ho Kwon watched the woman he loved stand in her own light, and something in his chest settled into a peace he had not known was possible. She found his eyes. She smiled. Their wedding was a garden in October. String lights in the trees, flowers everywhere. 40 people who had actually earned their place in Zara's life. She wore ivory and she left her neck uncovered. She had thought about it. She had made the choice. The scars were there, softer now but visible. They were part of her. They were not the point of her. She walked toward Jin-ho and thought about the girl who pulled her hat down low on crowded streets, and believed she was doing the world a favor by making herself small. She thought about that narrow back bedroom and the face-down mirror and all the silence she had swallowed because nobody told her she was allowed to speak. Then she looked at the man at the end of the aisle, the man who had seen her first in the middle of someone else's cruelty and decided she was worth knowing. And all of that history arranged itself into something she finally understood. It hadn't been the end of her story. It had been the beginning of the version that mattered. You look extraordinary, Jin-ho said as she reached him. You're biased, she said. Completely, he agreed. And I always will be. They built a life that was real before it was easy. She expanded the foundation. He spent years methodically moving the organization toward legitimate operations, slowly, imperfectly, with genuine intention. They argued. They reconciled. They chose each other on the ordinary days and the hard ones with equal deliberateness. Every year on the anniversary of the fundraiser gala, Jin-ho brought her back to that same room, and they danced to something slow while the city moved below them. One night, years in, she looked up at him mid-song. Do you ever wonder if you made the wrong call? Choosing me when you didn't have to? He looked at her for a long moment, the face he had memorized in every light, every mood, every version of itself. I wonder a lot of things, he said. That has never been one of them. Zara smiled, the kind that started in her chest before it reached her face. She thought about every person who had told her she was too broken, too scarred, too much, too little, too damaged to be chosen. She thought about how certain they had all seemed. And she thought about how wrong they had been. Because what she had learned finally and completely was this. You do not become worthy of love by hiding your damage. You become worthy of love by deciding you already are. The right person doesn't arrive and fix that for you. They arrive and confirm what you finally managed to believe on your own. And that, if you're still with me, is Zara and Jin-ho's story. If this one moved you, I want to know where you felt it most. Drop it in the comments. Hit the like button if you think someone in your life needs to hear that they are not too broken, not too scarred, not too much. Subscribe if you haven't already because there are more stories like this one coming, and you don't want to find out about them late. Share this with someone who is wearing their own version of a hat right now and doesn't yet know that the best of their story is still ahead. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember this. Your scars are not your sentence. They are your proof. Proof that you went through something real and you are still here.